Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Tourism and Hospitality Service Management, SOTHSM. Certificate in Tourism Studies, CTS. TS1 Foundation Course in Tourism. Block-2 Tourism Industry. Unit-6 Tourism Regulations. 6.0 Objectives. As a tourism professional, it is imperative on you to know all those legal and quasi-legal regulations that concern the tourist trade in this country. The objective of this unit is to give you all the important information that relates to the times inbound-outbound travelers, times economic regulations concerning such travelers, times health regulations of the travelers, times law and order regulations in vogue in the country, times catering for the travelers, and times regulations concerning environment protection in force in the country. 6.1 Introduction. A land of stupendous dimensions, colorful, exotic, traditional, modern. With her varied topography, picturesque valleys, high mountain peaks and cascading rivers, she never ceases to surprise tourists with her kaleidoscopic attractions. This is how India is introduced to an itinerant tourist information booklet, India. Department of Tourism, Government of India. Undoubtedly, this description excites her imagination. Matched by the unfailing warmth and hospitality of our people, India should naturally become a destination for tourists from all parts of the globe. But nay. Soon the excitement subsides and gives way to a realism that evokes a different response. India, a land of disorder where laxity in all kinds of regulations is a norm. This is an image based only partially on truth, but very largely a consequence of lack of information or even disinformation to some extent about the legal, regulatory control practiced in the country and adhered to in the same measure as in any other part of the world. It is, therefore, an essential requirement on the part of a tourism professional to obtain and master comprehensive information on the regulations that affect tourism both directly and indirectly. Also important is the passing of this information on to the itinerant tourists. This will help to annul their misfounded fears regarding India as a prospective destination. In addition, this will enable them to know about and respect the regulations during their stay in India. In this unit, our aim has been to provide you with important information in this regard. Here you must keep in mind the fact that the development and promotion of tourism in the country has largely been the responsibility of the Dept. of Tourism. Sadly, it has been functioning as a regulatory authority without any supporting legislation that specifically relates to tourism. As a result, it has not always been possible to ensure a coordinated development of the infrastructure and a uniform regulatory code for tourism. In this context, it is noteworthy that Asian and European countries, which value their tourism potential, have very successfully provided support and incentives to the tourism sectors by incorporating such features into a tourism act. See Appendix A for the salient features of some of these acts. 6.2 Inbound-outbound travel regulations. A traveler who is also a tourist is governed by the laws and regulations in force in the country which he visits. As a tourism professional, therefore, it is of vital concern to you that you are well versed in such regulatory controls that will affect your prospective clients. It is only then that you will be able to provide them with all the necessary information. As a tourism professional dealing with outbound tourists, it is important for you to obtain information about regions which your clients are intending to visit. 6.2.1 Passport and Visa Requirements. It is extremely important for all the visitors, except from Nepal, Bhutan and Bangladesh, from abroad to possess a valid passport issued by their respective countries before they enter Indian territory through land, sea or air route. Currently, visa is an essential requirement for people of all nationalities for entering India. There are several kinds of visas as listed below, available to foreign nationals. Times entry visa, times tourist visa, times business visa, long-term visa, maximum duration of 5 years, multiple entry facility, and collective landing permit, group tourists from abroad. Indian consular offices in different countries issue Indian visas. The fee for this visa is US $5 per person. But nationals of Britain pay a visa fee of £23, 1994 rates. The maximum duration for which tourist visas are issued is 180 days. But if a visa is issued for a lesser duration and an application for the extension of the same is made within 180 days, no extra fee is charged. The only requirement is submission of a set of identical passport photographs. There is also the provision for the extension of visa beyond 180 days, but this is exceptionally operated. In such cases, then the fee charged varies within a fixed scale. Extension of visa. Conversion of transit visa into other visa and stay valid up to 1 month hours. 125. Extension of visa up to 6 months on 1m. Nth visa collected abroad. Hours. 625. Extension of visa up to 1 year hours. 1300. Grant of 5-year visa hours. 2600. Note, the rates given here are those which pursued in January 1994 and they are changeable subject to government decision. Visas can be renewed in all state capitals and district headquarters on an application made to the District Police Chief, Commissioner of Police, Senior Superintendent of Police, Superintendent of Police. Visa renewals and extension cases in the cities of New Delhi, Bombay and Calcutta are handled by Foreigners Regional Registration Offices (FRROs). In Madras, such cases are dealt with by the Chief Immigration Officer (CIO). In Appendix B, we have given you addresses of major Indian consular offices overseas and FRO and CIO in India. The outbound travelers will seek visas from the embassies, consulates of respective countries they intend to visit. Most of these offices are located in New Delhi. The addresses of the embassies of the neighboring countries have been given in Appendix C. 6.2.2 Special Permits. Normally, there is no restriction on Indian and foreign nationals for movement within India. But in the case of border states and the 2 groups of islands, Andaman and Lakshadweep, a visitor requires a special entry permit. This permit is valid for a maximum period of 15 days only. For group tourists, the application for special permit must be made at least 2 weeks in advance of the intended date of visit. We have given below detailed information with regard to the issuance of such permits state-wise. Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Foreign nationals visiting the islands require prior permission. This can be obtained from Immigration Officer Port Blair on arrival. Permits can be obtained in advance from Chief Immigration Officers at Delhi, Bombay, Calcutta and Madras. Arunachal Pradesh. All foreign nationals intending to visit Arunachal Pradesh require restricted area permits issued by Deputy Secretary, Ministry of Home Affairs, Government of India, Lok Nayak Bhavan, Khan Market, New Delhi, 110003, phone 46197909. Indian nationals, domestic tourists, can obtain permits from Arunachal Bhavan at New Delhi, Calcutta, Guwahati and Tezpur, Assam. Only Guwahati, Sibsagar, Hafayong and Kaziranga are open for foreigners to visit these places. Permits are issued by Assam State Tourist Information Centers at Delhi and other parts of the country. Tourists can apply with passport size photographs, photocopy of passport and visa number. Permit is granted to groups of 4 and above only. Note, the areas for which special permits are required or which come under the category of restricted areas are as per January 1994. The Government of India may open more areas, hence it is advisable to recheck and update yourself as and when you need the information. 6.2 Custom regulations. The usual duty-free regulations of one bottle of liquor, i.e. 950 milliliters or less and 200 cigarettes apply for India. If the tourist brings in more than $1,000 in cash or travelers checks, it must be declared by completion of a currency declaration form. While small items like perfumes, cosmetics, etc. are allowed into the country, larger items like video cameras are likely to be entered on a tourist baggage re-export form to ensure that the article is taken back on departure. The TBRE form should be resubmitted on departure. A tourist can clear goods up to Rs to 4Q0 in value duty-free. Goods brought in excess of this are chargeable to duty as per prevailing law. Note, the figures, amount and regulations are as per the prevailing law in January 1994. They are subject to change by the government, hence, it is better to always keep oneself updated on them. 6.3 Economic regulations is equal to. The inbound as well as outbound tourist is subject to several economic regulations. We have dealt with some of the more important ones in the following subsections. You, as a tourism professional, are likely to deal with tourists generally within the ambit of these regulations. 6.3.1 Currency. Tourists are not allowed to bring Indian currency into the country or take it out of the country. However, there is no restriction on the amount of foreign currency or travelers checks that may be brought into India. However, the import and export of local currency is prohibited due to stringent exchange control regulations. On arrival, visitors should declare all foreign currency above $1,000. They are supposed to exchange currency only at banks and through authorized dealers, which include most hotels. With each exchange of currency, they are issued an exchange certificate which should be retained to re-exchange unused rupees on leaving the country. It is also their proof that they exchanged currency through legal channels. You must caution the foreign tourists not to exchange currency in black market. The one who does so is not only breaking the law of the country but at the same time also running the risk of getting cheated. For example, a tourist from East Europe was passed on used lottery tickets as currency in lieu of $1,000 by cheats in Delhi. Foreigners are not allowed to leave India with any local currency. For their convenience, banks at international airports are open 24 hours daily to convert unused rupees. But encashment certificate must be produced while returning Indian rupees. 6.3.2 Insurance. Insurance companies active in the field of movement of persons and travel have become increasingly involved in the provision of insurance to protect the client as well as the agent or the operators of tourism services. Most schemes are in the field of protection and security of the traveler as, for example, the Green Card scheme governing international travel by private motorists. Besides such insurance or indemnity schemes, travel has offered a number of creative situations and possibilities to insurance companies. The typical tourist is generally confronted by two major travel risks. Natural or human risks, like contagious disease, civil strife, natural disasters which may occur at the tourist destination. The agent or operator is neither in a position to foresee or forecast such events, nor is he in all cases able to find ways to minimize or avoid the consequences in such circumstances. Most legislation accepts force majeure or common law doctrine on the question of compensation liability of the agent, operator or provider of services. However, since most risks are allocated between the operator and the tourist by contract rather than the operation of the law, the presupposition is that both the operator and the tourist have equal bargaining power. But in fact, the tourist lacks the economic strength to negotiate coverage of all risks. 2. Risks due to the acts of omission on the part of the operator, or what is termed fault-oriented risks. These are generally understood to arise from violation of a particular law or regulation or the failure to conform to standards, which in many cases remain undefined. In some cases, reasonable standards are subject to discretionary interpretation when referred to tribunals which have been established to hear and decide such cases. The same assumption of reasonable care devolves on the tourists as well. Thus, there is a necessary limitation on tourist risk evaluation in both legislation and insurance coverage. What is termed constructive notice is often considered sufficient to impose a legal obligation on the parties to a contract. Insurance can therefore be unreliable, as in the case of agent's professional liability. A policy covers acts and omissions by the agent, but not fraud or agent's unlawful conduct. 2. Exclusion clause protection. Such a policy also demands a 60-day time limit within which to file a claim, which the tourist is often not aware of. Therefore, international efforts have been directed towards the development and implementation of a comprehensive system aimed at providing availability, affordability, clear and consistent exclusions, and compulsory funding and accountability by travel and tourism operators in the field of tourism. In theory, no legal system insists on or sanctions strict liability against all risks, and suggests only a compromise between the tourist and the operator. In general, legal precepts cover such factors as which party is more liable to pay, 2. The seriousness of the risk and the harm it may result in, 3. The ability of the party to spread the cost of the risk amongst its customers, and 4. The importance of protecting the injured party. Beyond this, certain no-fault risks are compensated through the medium of insurance. Insurance is therefore supplementary to the need for uniform principles of law and administration that intergovernmental organizations are trying to bring about. 6.3. 3. Income tax. If a person not domiciled in India intends to stay in the country for more than 120 days, an income tax clearance certificate is required in order to leave TT country. This document will prove that the person's stay in India was financed by his own money and not by working or selling his goods. The foreign sections of the Income Tax Department at Delhi, Calcutta, Madras and Bombay issues these certificates on being shown the person's passport, visa extension form and the currency exchange receipts which have been used by the person. 6.3.4 Foreign travel tax. For international travel from Indian airports, 150 rupees must be paid for travel to neighboring countries and hours. 300 for travel to all other countries, 1994 rates. This tax is also applicable to infants who may not be occupying seats. 6.4 Health regulations. Health protection of travelers is viewed from a dual standpoint, including preventive and curative measures. Vaccination is the internationally accepted form of preventative health care. Curative measures are based on the particular circumstances related to climate, environment, and disease factors at the destination. 6.4.1 Vaccination. WHO, under international sanitary regulations, publishes regular information concerning both required and recommended vaccination procedures for international travelers. The local tourist information centers also advise domestic tourists regarding epidemic conditions within the country. Diseases have been successfully controlled or eradicated as a result of implementing the vaccination regulations. A standard format has been developed for vaccination certificates so that the procedures of one country are recognized in other countries. This is an excellent example of International cooperation in the prevention of disease. The current fears regarding AIDS can also be overcome by similar international cooperation. Once an infectious disease has been notified, if vaccination procedures are not available, health checks can be related to visa formalities if tourists are coming from the identified countries or regions of the world. 6.4.2 Health insurance. Travelers may be concerned not only with medical attention to specific diseases at the destination, but also for pre-existing health problems. Provision of medical attention to travelers has therefore been a key issue of debate. A further question that inevitably comes up in the provision of health care is the responsibility of payment. Social Security often pays for the health care of both residents and non-residents in some foreign countries. In other cases, only entitled persons may claim free medical attention. Reciprocal arrangements do exist between countries which have economic or cultural ties with each other, like EEC countries. In some cases, emergency or accident cases may be treated free. In all other cases, medical treatment must be paid for at the existing rate, which varies according to the cost of living in different countries. Private medical insurance companies are generally used to provide coverage for such expenditure. Such insurance can be purchased either at home or in the receiving country. Spain's Seguro Turístico is the best known example of medical insurance for the tourist. In commercial contracts, difficulties may arise due to the exclusion of pre-existing medical conditions, or insurance may not be available to senior citizens who are in the high-risk category. Lack of medical insurance can be an obstacle to the movement of both international and domestic travelers. It has been suggested by WTO that where there are state-owned insurance companies, medical insurance should be extended to cover all sections of the population, regardless of age. This has been accepted in principle by UFTAA. 6.5 Law and Order Regulations. All tourists, in the matter of law and order regulations, are subject to the regulations enforced in the land of their visit. India is an attractive tourist destination, yet tourists have, on occasion, complained of the treatment they get while vacationing in India. There is a lack of tourism consciousness which leads to avoidable behavior towards the tourist, particularly by dealers and shopkeepers, intermediaries and tourist guides, touts, owners of boarding houses or houseboats, hoteliers, and operators of surface transport. We have given here the essential information for the facility of the tourists in such matters. 6.5.1 Police and District Officials. The administrative setup in India divides the country into states further subdivided into districts. Each district in the states is manned by a district magistrate collector and a police chief designated as the superintendent senior superintendent of police. These two officials are the top functionaries of the state at the level of the district. The tourist should be advised to meet either of these officials in case of any difficulty pertaining to the matter of law and order in the district. In all emergencies, 100 is the number to be dialed. You must also learn how to make the first information report, FIR, at the police station. Point 6.5.2 Law on Cheating. Tourists often complain of cheating while shopping. There have been complaints that at times guides and touts tend to direct the tourists to shops which give them a percentage on the amount of business they generate. Whenever the tourist does not patronize the establishment suggested by a guide, he is treated indifferently by. Another type of complaint is that of cases like the ones listed below. A tourist has come to see the Taj at Agra. He is told there is curfew and he cannot go, which is not true. he is pushed towards shopping. Times the tourist wants to see some museum, he is told repairs are going on, hence he should spend that time on shopping. Times fare of deluxe bus is charged, but he is put on an ordinary bus, and times the tourist wants to go to government emporium, instead he is taken to private shop with government approved written on its board, etc. The tourist's money and belonging are sometimes stolen, or the staff of the hotel is negligent. Hotels have also been, at times, accused of overcharging beyond approved tariffs, overbilling for services and overbooking. The business code is also based on an attitude of mistrust, and given the fact that regulations are difficult to enforce, tourists or travel organizers often face genuine problems which can be in the nature of a breach of contract. The legal system in India is extremely overburdened. For a tourist to get a just settlement from a court can take many years. The first complaint has to be registered at a district court, where the backlog of cases is already so enormous that a time-bound settlement is unrealistic. Interestingly, one country which has endeavored to ensure effective and prompt redressal of tourist grievances is the Federal Republic of Germany, where there is no tourist legislation. All complaints are serviced under the Civil Code. A booklet has been prepared by their tourist board to inform the tourist of his rights and the procedure for making a complaint to the relevant body. It is possible to set up a grievance cell to be administered by the tourism department or the ministry, where, by the principle of mutual adjustment, a just settlement can be arrived at and compensation paid to the tourist. Such a grievance cell should handle complaints that are beyond the scope of insurance claims. In countries where insurance is statutory, a special premium is charged to cover the claims of tourists on the basis of experience. However, some claims are bound to arise out of exclusion clauses, and a properly constituted grievance cell is normally competent to handle such complaints. 6.5.3 Law on Antiquities. The antiquities of India are covered under Antiquities and Art Treasures Act, 1972. According to the rules given in this act, the following items come under the category of antiquities and art treasures. I. Sculpture. 2. Painting. 3. Other works of art and craftsmanship illustrative of science, art, crafts and religion, and of historical interest. All the above items, to become antiquities, should have been in existence for not less than 100 years. In addition to these, all manuscripts or other documents of scientific, historical, literary, or aesthetic value in existence for not less than 75 years cannot be exported out of India. For further clarifications and inquiries, we have listed addresses of relevant authorities in different regions of India in Appendix D. 6.5.4 Shopping Malpractices Regulations. Tourist spending is becoming an increasingly important source of revenue generation, especially in hard currency, in most tourist receiving countries. This particularly important in India, where the average stay of a tourist is reckoned to be 28 days. This implies that the opportunity for a tourist to shop in the different cities increases. In the items of tourist expenditure, next to transport and accommodation, shopping is the third important area. India offers a diversity of shopping interests and attractions for tourists, i.e., from inexpensive souvenirs and handicrafts to the costly variety of gems and jewelry, carpets, artifacts like ivory, precious stones, paintings, etc. Notwithstanding the foregoing, the complaints commonly voiced against shopping in India relate to times non-adherence of quality standards, times supplied product not matching the samples approved, and times unscrupulous practices of touts and petty shopkeepers who mushroom around tourist spots. Examples of a variety of complaints by tourists have been highlighted from time to time in the media. This aspect has also been pointed out time and again by the travel trade. Unless checked, the continuance of such a situation results in bad word of mouth publicity for India. These complaints are aggravated and accentuated by lack of authentic information regarding prices, quality, standard of establishment, system of certification and recognition of shopping establishments. Whilst bargain ng is one of the pleasures of shopping, in the local ambience, which cannot and should not be denied to a tourist for the sake of its experience, it has to be recognized that at some important tourist centers in India, prices quoted and charged defy all concepts of bargaining. Some discipline needs to be enforced in this area. The image of bargaining creates other problems also. You may laugh at it, but the example here is worth citing. Someone gave a friendly advice to a small group of tourists that while shopping they should start by quoting half the price as acceptable to them, and they may ultimately get the thing at 40% less the original quote. The group applied this to everything they wanted to have, and this created odd situations. For a cold drink they would bargain for rupees 3 instead of 6, a cup of tea they wanted at 50 paise instead of Re 1, and so on, with everyone laughing at them. And soon it was pointed out to them. Examples of complaints frequently raised at an important tourist region pertain to non-execution or non-fulfillment of orders placed against advance or down payment for delivery of the product offered. This has been noticed with repetitive frequency in the case of carpets. A classic illustration cited is the despair of a foreign tourist who made an advance payment of $2,000 for a carpet, which he never received. On subsequent inquiry, he was informed that the stock of carpets was washed away in floods, and could he send another $1,000 to enable the execution of the order. There have been cases where the quality of carpets shown was a better one when orders were booked, but when executed the quality was inferior. Legislation and regulation should be so designed as to discourage such tendencies by indicating the severity zero action for indulging in such malpractices. This also needs to be brought home to other agents concerned with tourist shopping, like taxi drivers, bus conductors, guides, couriers and others, who tend to direct tourists only to such establishments which assure them a reasonable return on the volume of business generated by their efforts. In fact, they should be made to realize that such malpractices ultimately affect the image of the destination, which is a loss for all in the long run. Several establishments selling souvenirs and artifacts boldly display large signs indicating that they are government or Ministry of Tourism approved emporiums or shops. The emphasis is on the word government, and the lettering for approved is in nondescript and unreadably small print. This needs to be reviewed for systems of recognition, if at all required, for avoidance of unfair practices by shopping establishments. Establishments selling souvenirs and artifacts boldly display large signs indicating that they are government or Ministry of Tourism approved emporiums or shops. The emphasis is on the word government, and the lettering for approved is in nondescript and unreadably small print. This needs to be reviewed for systems of recognition, if at all required, for avoidance of unfair practices by shopping establishments. 6.6 Accommodation and Catering Regulations. Many countries have legislation covering the hospitality sector as a sequel to common law, constitutional law or penal codes enacted by central or state governments. The purpose of such legislation is to transform the relationship between the hotel keeper or the restaurateur and his clients into a business contract or a consumer contract. The emphasis in the former type of contract is to foster the business relationship and enhance Goodwill between the business partners. In the latter type of contract, the emphasis is on security and consumers' use of the facilities and services offered. There is a third area of legislation that covers the classification of facilities and services offered by the hotel sector to enhance consumer protection and consumer satisfaction as well as to protect domestic trade vis-à-vis international competition. Here the emphasis of legislation is to ensure that an establishment supplies accommodation and facilities to their clients and the standards commensurate with the price charged. It is to be regretted that not much progress in this regard has been made in India. In the following subsections, therefore, we shall delve mostly on the features that may be accommodated in such a legislation regulation. 6.6.1 Legislation for Hospitality Sector. Leg of duties and responsibilities covered by legislation may be as listed here. A. Right to accept or refuse lodging to a person or a group. Refusal is generally under 3 conditions. I. Improper conduct or objectionable character. 2. Inability or refusal to pay. 3. Minors who behave in an objectionable manner or cannot pay for services consumed. B. Duty to protect person and property of a guest or patron. The management is not liable under the following conditions. I. Injury or disturbance. 2. Refusal to pay charges. C. Entry of police is to be purely investigatory unless I. The management makes a specific complaint. 2. The police determines, upon investigation, that arrest is proper. D. Locking out of a guest is permissible under 2 conditions. I. Refusal to pay. 2. Overstay. E. Acceptance of valuables for safekeeping is permissible under the following conditions. I. Valuables are accepted for safekeeping in a metal safe or vault, for which a receipt has been issued. 2. The value of the goods should not exceed a certain value, which is agreed upon, in writing, by the management and the guest. 3. The general liability of a depository for hire. 4. No liability where guest's negligence is established. F. Hotel manager's lien is I. To demand proper charges for accommodation and meals and any other extras. 2. On property in and around the hotel, but no stolen property in the possession of the guest. 3. Not intended to cover prior debts, but only the present service facility provided to the guest. 4. Items under lien must be held for 60 days, whereafter they can be publicly auctioned, giving a 100-day notice which must be delivered to the guest at the residential address noted in the hotel register. Money gained in excess of the guest's liability must be paid up within 6 months or deposited with a competent authority along with a statement of the claim, copy of the published notice, costs and the amount received at the sale. G. Fraud can be established under the following conditions. 1. Using deception to acquire accommodation. 2. Departure without payment. 3. Failure to pay rental or other charges without reasonable cause. Penalties and their severity will depend on the number of offences. H. Guests' right of privacy cannot be violated except under specified legal conditions. I. Tenancy can be established by I. Length of stay, 30 days and above. 2. A special agreement. 3. Existence of a permanent residence. J. The management is responsible for guests, invitees of guests, employees and any other persons lawfully on the premises or property. K. High standards of care relate to I. Selection and retention of employees. L. Accommodation facilities. Tilde. 3. Evicting guests and others. 4. Key control and guest room security. V. Fire security. 6. Lighting, maintenance, SOS call numbers. 7. Research into common problem areas and common experience. Tourism regulations. 6.6.2 Catering regulations. In the succeeding paragraphs, the regulations relating to catering by restaurants have been briefly examined. With the development of domestic and international tourism worldwide, standardization in the preparation and serving of food is reflected in hotel and restaurant ordinances and public health acts that have been extended to cover catering services in many countries. The salient features of such legislation are: I. Consumer protection through quality control. 2. Through pricing policy to comply with demand. 3. Vending and consumption of liquor and intoxicating beverages, keeping in view the interest of the consumer, the vendor, revenue to the state as well as conforming to social norms. Legislation also covers the hygiene of those who are employed to handle provisions and to cook and to serve food items, since the management of an hotel or a restaurant is liable for any danger to the guest or patron's life and v11 being whilst legally on the premises. Ordinances also cover equipment and technology to comply with health laws as well as to retain the professional standards demand of catering establishments. Legislation in the field of restaurant operations is often an extension of that in the hotel sector, as in many cases, the services are combined into one product. Therefore, restaurants also share some of the common problems that are faced by hoteliers, and often the solutions are similar. 6.7 Environment protection and conservation. Cultural resources, both natural and man-made, have great value for tourism. They should be properly listed and documented with the help of available technology and the concerned organizations. There is a lot of pressure on these resources, and pollution emanating from different metric ton human activities like settlements, industries, mining, etc. requires special study and attention if the ancient cultural heritage of the destination is not to be damaged. 6.7.1 Environmental concern. India has a wealth of flora and fauna. It is estimated that there are over 500 species of mammals, 2,000 species of birds, 30,000 species of insects, in addition to hundreds of species of aquatic and reptile life in the country. Much of the fauna of the country is protected by the Indian Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. As a result, the country has developed 66 national parks, 333 wildlife sanctuaries, and 35 zoological gardens. The provisions of the Act prohibit killing or poaching of any of the protected species. The violations of the provisions of the Act attract severe punishment ranging from fine in terms of money to detentions and imprisonment for extended periods. 6.7.2 Conservation. Preservation and maintenance requires in-depth study and proper financing, since much of the ancient heritage is subject to the depredations of both natural and human factors. Most countries have an Antiquities and Art Treasures Act, which enables national museums to acquire items which could be stolen or smuggled out of the country. Similarly, archaeological survey organizations discharge the responsibility of conservation of monuments and documentary heritage. Art and craft are also brought under the museum movement, since they form the backbone of our cultural identity and an important area of expenditure by the tourist. Many countries indicate linkages with town and country planners for the implementation of master plans and for the identification of conservation zones. A heritage conservation area has been defined as an area of special architectural, historical and cultural interest, or an area which is geographically and ecologically unique. Such areas can be small or can include whole towns, squares, streets, or groups of buildings, features of archaeological interest, waterways, beaches, forests, mountains, etc. Within a designated area, The conservation of its cultural identity is an integral component of all developmental schemes. In this way, the quality of life of those living and working in such zones will improve, and they will have an increased income from crafts, trade and tourism. Conservation and pollution control measures suggested by WTO. I. Providing for pedestrian zones at holiday resorts, shopping malls, public parks, playgrounds, etc. 2. Encouraging the resident population, through contests and other activities, to decorate their houses and balconies. 3. Coordinating tourist recreation with the social and cultural activities of the local population, through information and publicity campaigns. 4. Applying multiple-use concepts of facilities wherever possible. V. Awarding national quality seals of approval for tourist recreation facilities to operators of accommodation units and other travel services. 6. Many countries have also initiated the formation of heritage bodies and art and cultural funds, which then serve to identify conservation heritage zones and coordinate funding, for which tax reliefs to contributors are given by the concerned governments. In view of the fact that the 7th plan envisages a growth rate of 10 to 12% per annum in international tourism, the servicing of this projected increase in the number of tourists would require a matching increase in infrastructure. 50 million domestic tourists per annum would also require services and facilities, perhaps at a budget or economy level. This expansion should be given weightage in the master plan of any city, so that tourism services are not only integrated with other activities, but its special needs are taken care of. 6.8 Summary. You must have realized by now how important is it to dispel myths regarding lack or even absence of any regulations in India that concern the tourists. We have given you necessary information pertaining to such regulations, and we expect you to pass it on to the itinerant tourist and assure him that he will be landing in an orderly place meeting the highest standards of civilization. Thank you. We will see you.